The cantina reeked of exotic alcohols and broken dreams, its dim lighting casting long shadows across faces that preferred anonymity. Zara Thorne sat in the corner booth, her weathered leather jacket pulled tight against the recycled air that never quite warmed the chill in her bones. The whiskey burned as it went down, but not enough to dull the edge of desperation that had driven her to this godforsaken station, orbiting the rim worlds. 3 months since the Titan Syndicate had put a price on her head. 3 months since her last legitimate cargo run. 3 months since she'd had enough credits to properly fuel her ship, the Wanderer's Dream, which currently sat in the station's cheapest docking bay with more problems than solutions. "You look like someone who's run out of options." The voice carried an accent she couldn't place melodic, with underlying harmonics that suggested non-human vocal chords. Zara looked up to find herself staring into eyes the color of molten amber, set in a face that was almost human, but not quite. His skin held a subtle golden undertone that caught the cantina's lights, and his dark hair fell in waves that seemed to move with their own current. He was tall, lean, dressed in clothes that had once been expensive, but now showed the wear of someone living rough. "Depends who's asking," Zara replied, her hand instinctively moving closer to the plasma pistol at her hip. In her line of work, strangers offering conversation usually meant trouble. He slid uninvited into the booth across from her, moving with a fluid grace that confirmed her suspicions about his species. "Someone who might have a proposition for you. I hear you're a pilot, a good one, despite recent setbacks." Zara studied his face, noting the sharp cheekbones and the way his amber eyes seemed to hold depth she couldn't fathom. There was something regal about his bearing, even in his current disheveled state. "And what would someone like you know about my setbacks? Word travels fast in places like this," he said, gesturing to encompass the seedy cantina, "especially when it concerns Captain Zara Thorne, formerly of the Confederation shipping lanes, currently wanted by the Titan Syndicate for creative interpretations of cargo manifests." She tensed. "You wearing a wire? Because if you're thinking about collecting that bounty, relax." He held up his hands, and she noticed they were elegant, with longer fingers than pure humans possessed. "I'm the last person who would turn anyone into the authorities. My name is Kale Vorthuk, and I'm what you might call persona non grata among my people." The surname clicked in her memory. Vorthuk, one of the royal houses of the Etherean Republic, the alien civilization that controlled 3 sectors and had been in tense negotiations with human space for decades. "Your nobility was," Kale corrected, his expression darkening. "Past tense. Turns out speaking out against your father's war plans is considered treasonous, even when you're heir to the throne. Especially when you're heir to the throne." Zara leaned back, reassessing. An exiled alien prince with daddy issues, that was either the beginning of a very profitable partnership or a very quick death. "What kind of proposition are we talking about?" Kale reached into his jacket, moving slowly to avoid spooking her, and withdrew a data pad. The holographic display showed star charts of the neutrals on the disputed territory between human and Etherean space that neither side officially controlled, but both sides heavily patrolled. "There's a research station," he said, pointing to a blinking dot deep in the neutral zone, Orbital Platform 7. It was abandoned during the Proxima incident 5 years ago, but recent intelligence suggests it's not as empty as everyone believes. "Intelligence from who?" "People who pay well for the right information." Kel's amber eyes met hers. "The station contains data that both our governments would kill for research into jump drive technology that could revolutionize space travel. Get me there, help me retrieve the data, and we split the profits." 50-50, Zara laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You want me to fly into the most heavily patrolled stretch of space in the galaxy, to a station that's probably crawling, with automated defenses, to steal data that could start an interstellar war, all for a 50-50 split with someone I met 5 minutes ago." "When you put it like that, it does sound rather optimistic," Kale admitted with a wry smile that transformed his entire face. For a moment, she caught a glimpse of what he must have been like before exile: charming, confident, probably insufferably arrogant. But consider the alternative. You can sit here drinking synthetic whiskey until your credits run out and the Titan Syndicate finally tracks you down. Or you can take a chance on something that could set you up for life. The worst part was that he was right. Zara's options had dwindled to almost nothing. The Wanderer's dream needed major repairs she couldn't afford. Her contacts were all either dead or had turned their backs on her after the Syndicate incident. And her reputation was shot. One more week of eating protein bars and recycled water, and she'd probably be desperate enough to try legitimate work if anyone would hire her. "What makes you think I won't just turn you in the moment we clear the station?" she asked, exiled. "Prince would probably bring a nice bounty from your people. Because," Kale said, leaning forward slightly, "you're not the type to betray someone who trusts you. Your problem with the Titan Syndicate started when you refused to transport slaves. Disguised as cargo, didn't it? You have principles, Captain Thorne. It's probably why you're broke." Heat rose in her cheeks. He'd done his homework, which meant he was either very well connected or very desperate. "Possibly both. You don't know anything about me. I know enough." His voice softened slightly. "I know you've been flying solo for 3 years since your partner was killed in a Syndicate raid. I know you turned down 6 different offers to join pirate crews because you won't prey on innocent civilians. I know you send half your profits to a charity that helps war orphans on Kepler 7, even when you can barely afford fuel for your own ship." Zara stared at him, unsettled by how much he'd learned about her life. "You've been stalking me. I've been researching potential partners. There's a difference." Kale deactivated the data pad and slid it across the table to her. "I need someone I can trust, Captain. Someone who won't sell me out the moment things get complicated. Based on your history, you're one of the few people in this sector who fits that description. And what's to stop you from betraying me once we get the data? Apart from the fact that I need you to fly us out of there." Kel's amber eyes held hers steadily. "I give you my word as a Vorthok. I know that probably doesn't mean much to you, but it's all I have left." There was something in his tone of vulnerability beneath the practiced charm that made her believe him. Or maybe she was just desperate enough to grasp at any lifeline. "No matter how thin, the neutral zone is suicide," she said finally. "Both sides shoot first and don't bother asking questions. My ship isn't exactly military grade, but you know those shipping lanes better than anyone," Kale countered. "You've been running cargo through disputed space for years. If anyone can get us in and out without starting an international incident, it's you." Zara picked up the data pad, studying the mission parameters. It was insane, dangerous, and likely to end with both of them dead or imprisoned. It was also the best offer she'd had in months. 60-40, she said. "My ship, my risk. Deal." Kale extended his hand across the table. When she shook it, his skin was warmer than she'd expected, and she found herself noticing how his fingers were just slightly longer than human proportions, giving his grip an oddly elegant quality. "When do we leave?" she asked, releasing his hand perhaps a moment too late. "As soon as possible. Every day we wait increases the chance that someone else will get there first, or that the patrol schedules will change." Kale stood, and she realized he was taller than she'd initially thought, probably close to 6.5 feet. "I have some equipment to gather. Can your ship be ready in 6 hours?" "She'll have to be." Zara knocked back the rest of her whiskey and stood as well. "Fair warning, though the Wanderer's dream isn't luxury transport. No artificial gravity in the cargo hold. The environmental systems run loud, and the food synthesizer only makes 3 flavors, none of them good. I've been sleeping in maintenance tunnels for the past month," Kale said with that transformative smile again. "Your ship sounds like paradise." As they left the cantina together, Zara found herself stealing glances at her new partner. There was something about the way he moved, the careful way he scanned their surroundings, that suggested he'd been living dangerous for longer than just the past month. She wondered what he'd done to earn exile from one of the most powerful alien families in known space. More importantly, she wondered if she was making the biggest mistake of her career, or if this mysterious prince might be exactly what she needed to turn her luck around. The Wanderer's dream sat in docking bay 7, looking exactly as tired as Zara felt. The medium-range freighter had seen better decades, her hull scarred by micrometeorite impacts and hasty repairs, But she was fast, reliable, and more importantly, she was home. She's beautiful, Kale said, and Zara couldn't tell if he was being sarcastic. She's mine, Zara replied, which was really all that mattered. Let's go steal some data. The Wanderer's dream hummed through hyperspace with the steady rhythm of an old engine that had seen too many star systems and not enough maintenance. Zara kept her hands on the controls even though the autopilot was engaged, needing something familiar to anchor her as the ship carried them deeper into territory where both human and Etherian patrol fleets would shoot on sight. You're nervous, Kale observed from the co-pilot's seat. He'd been studying the navigation charts for the past hour, his amber eyes reflecting the glow of the display screens. I'm cautious, Zara corrected, though she couldn't deny the knot of tension in her stomach. There's a difference. Nervous people make mistakes. Cautious people live longer. In my experience, the two aren't mutually exclusive. Cal's fingers traced patterns on the armrest of his chair, elegant, unconscious gestures that reminded Zara he'd been raised in palace halls, not cargo holds. I've been both nervous and cautious for the better part of 6 months now, since your exile, since I learned what my father was really planning. Cal's expression darkened, and for a moment the practiced charm fell away entirely. The war protocols weren't just contingency plans, they were blueprints for systematic conquest. Zara risked a glance at him. In the blue-white glow of hyperspace, his golden skin seemed almost luminescent, and she found herself wondering what other differences lay beneath the surface similarities to humanity. That's what got you exiled, opposing a war, specifically, opposing the enslavement of inferior species. The bitter edge in his voice made her stomach clench. My father believes that Etherians are evolutionarily destined to rule the galaxy. Humans, in his view, are useful for manual labor, but lack the intellectual capacity for true civilization. Charming family you have there. The worst part is, I used to believe it too. Kale turned to look at her directly, and she saw genuine shame in his amber eyes. For 27 years, I accepted that we were simply better. It wasn't until I started studying human achievements, your art, your literature, your stubborn refusal to surrender in the face of overwhelming odds that I began to question everything I'd been taught. The ship's proximity alarm chimed softly, and Zara's attention snapped back to the instruments. We're approaching the neutral zone boundary. Time to drop out of hyperspace and switch to silent running. Her hands moved across the controls with practiced efficiency, powering down all non-essential systems and activating the stealth modifications she'd installed. After one too many close calls with customs officials, the Wanderer's dream shifted from the steady hum of hyperspace travel to the near silence of emergency power. How long until we reach the station? Kale asked, his voice dropping to match the ship's hushed atmosphere. 8 hours at current speed. Maybe 6 if we don't run into patrol. The long-range sensors lit up with multiple contacts, and Zara's blood went cold. Spoke too soon. 3 ships had appeared on the edge of sensor range, moving information toward their position. The configuration was unmistakably military, but Zara couldn't tell if they were human Confederation vessels or Etherian war cruisers. Options? Kale asked, leaning forward to study the tactical display. We run, we hide, or we talk our way out of it. Zara's fingers hovered over the engine controls. Running would be loud and obvious. Hiding means powering down completely and hoping they don't skin this asteroid field too carefully. And talking depends on who they are and how good my fake transponder codes are this week. The approaching ships were close enough now for the computer to analyze their design. Confederation Patrol Group, 3 destroyers in standard search formation. Kale was quiet for a long moment, studying the sensor readouts with an intensity that made Zara glance at him curiously. There was something in his expression, not fear, exactly, but a kind of grim recognition. They're not on patrol, he said finally. They're hunting. How can you tell? The formation. It's designed for pursuit, not general surveillance. Kel's hands clenched into fists. Someone told them we were coming. Zara felt ice form in her chest. Who else knew about this mission? No one. I've been operating completely alone since my exile. But even as he said it, doubt crept into his voice. Unless The communication system crackled to life before he could finish the thought. Unknown vessel. This is Captain Briggs of the Confederation destroyer Relentless. You are in violation of neutral zone treaties. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. Zara muted the comm and turned to Kale. We need to run. Now, wait. Kel's amber eyes were distant, calculating. Briggs, I know that name. Human, mid-50s. Scar across his left temple from the Kepler 7 incident. How the hell would you know that? Because he's been meeting secretly with Etherian military commanders for the past year. Kel's voice was grim. Captain Thorne, I don't think we stumbled into a patrol. I think we stumbled into a trap. Before Zara could respond, her ship lurched violently to starboard. The lights flickered, and she heard the distinctive whine of weapons powering up on the ships approaching them. Warning shot, she muttered, bringing the engines online. They're done talking. The Wanderer's dream leaped forward as Zara engaged. The sublight drives, diving toward the cover of the asteroid field. Behind them, the three destroyers adjusted course to follow, their superior speed quickly closing the distance. They're not trying to disable us, Kale observed, watching the tactical display as weapons fire lit up space around them. They're trying to destroy us. Yeah, I noticed. Zara threw the ship into a spiraling dive between two massive asteroids, using their bulk to break sensor lock. Any brilliant ideas from the former prince? Actually, yes. Kale was working frantically at his console, accessing files she didn't recognize. There's a monitoring station built into this asteroid field hidden Etherian listening post. If we can reach it, we might be able to use their communication array to send a message to someone who might actually want to help us. His fingers flew over the controls, and suddenly new data appeared on her navigation display, a route through the asteroid field that led to what looked like a hollowed-out rock. There, that's our destination. Zara banked hard to port, following the new course even as weapons fire exploded against the asteroids around them. You want to explain why you know about secret Etherian installations? Because I designed some of them, Kale admitted. Before my exile, I was involved in intelligence operations. This particular station was supposed to monitor human shipping, lanes for potential military buildups, so you were a spy. I was a patriot who became a spy who became a traitor who became an exile. Kel's voice carried bitter humor. It's been a complicated year. The hidden station appeared on their screens, a cleverly camouflaged installation, built into the heart of a massive asteroid. Docking bays opened as they approached, and Zara realized the entire operation was automated. How did you, Royal? Access codes, Kale explained. Some things they haven't thought to revoke yet. The Wanderer's dream slid into the docking bay, just as the pursuing destroyers rounded the asteroid cluster. Inside the station, gravity generators engaged, and atmospheric processors began cycling air into the bay. They won't find us here, Kale said, but he didn't sound entirely confident. The station is designed to be invisible to human sensors, and if they decide to search every asteroid in the field, then we'd better work fast. Kale was already unbuckling his restraints, moving toward the ship's exit. I need to access the communication array. Zara followed him through the airlock into the station proper. The corridors were eerily quiet, lit by the soft blue glow of Etherian emergency lighting. Everything was built to a slightly larger scale than human architecture, with curved walls and organic-looking design elements that made her feel like she was walking through the belly of some vast creature. The communication center should be this way, Kale said, leading her through passages that all looked identical to her human eyes. Who exactly are we calling for help? Nexus, Kale replied. They're a traitor-independent operator who works both sides of the neutral zone. More importantly, they owe me a favor. They found the communication center after several minutes of walking. Kel's fingers moved across controls that looked nothing like human technology, his movements confident. Despite months of exile, Nexus, he spoke into the communication pickup. This is Kale Vorthuk. I'm calling in that favor from Proxima Station. The response came in the form of harmonics that hurt Zara's ears, clearly not designed for human hearing. Kel's side of the conversation was in his own language, a flowing series of tones that rose and fell like music. What are they saying? Zara asked during a pause in the exchange. Nexus confirms that someone leaked our mission parameters to both human and Etherian military commands, Kale said grimly. There are ships from both sides converging on orbital platform 7. This whole thing has been a setup from the beginning. Setup for what? To start a war. Kel's amber eyes met hers, and she saw fear there not for himself, but for something much larger. Someone wants human and Etherian forces to clash over that research station. They want to turn a cold war into a hot one. The implications hit her like a physical blow. We were bait, Kale confirmed. The question is, do we run, or do we try to stop it? Before Zara could answer, alarms began blaring. The automated defense systems of the hidden station shuddered as the first exchange of fire erupted between the human and Etherian fleets above them. Through the observation ports, Zara could see the silent lightning of energy weapons painting the asteroid field in brilliant, deadly colors. How long before they detect this station? She asked, watching a human destroyer spiral away from the battle with atmosphere venting from its hull. The camouflage will hold unless someone takes a direct hit to this asteroid, Kale replied, his fingers still dancing across the alien controls. But if either fleet decides to use heavy ordnance, as if summoned by his words, a massive explosion lit up the viewport. One of the Etherian cruisers had fired a plasma torpedo into the asteroid cluster, vaporizing 3 large rocks and sending debris cascading through space. We need to get out of here, Zara said, but even as the words left her mouth, she knew it was too late. The Wanderer's dream was fast, but not fast enough to outrun military vessels in open space. And with both fleets now engaged in active combat, anything that moved would be considered a target. Wait! Kale had gone very still, listening to something on the communication array. Nexus is transmitting emergency frequencies. They're not just trading information, they're coordinating with someone else. Who? I don't know, but Kel's amber eyes widened. Captain Thorne, Nexus just transmitted the exact location of this station to both fleets. They're not trying to help us, they're making sure we don't escape. The betrayal hit like a physical blow. Zara had been double-crossed before, but never in a situation where the stakes were this high. So Nexus is part of the setup to it. Gets worse. Kel's voice was grim as he read the incoming transmissions. They're broadcasting that we're here to gather a human criminal and an Etherian exile who have stolen classified military data. Both sides are being told that we're the reason for the other side's presence. The station shook again as another explosion rocked the asteroid field. Through the communication array, Zara could hear fragments of battle chatter from both fleets' angry voices demanding blood for perceived treachery. We're the trigger, she realized. Someone set this whole thing up so that when the shooting started, both sides would blame us for starting it. And when they find our bodies in the wreckage, it will be proof that the other side committed an act of war by killing their enemy's citizens in neutral space. Kale began shutting down the communication systems. We have to get to orbital. Platform 7. Are you insane? That's exactly where they expect us to go, exactly. Which means it's also where we'll find whoever orchestrated this. Kale turned to face her, and she saw something burning in his amber eyes that hadn't been there before, not just anger, but purpose. Someone wants a war badly enough to sacrifice both our peoples for it. I intend to find out. Who? Another blast shook the station, closer this time. Emergency lighting flickered, and somewhere in the distance, Zara heard the hiss of atmospheric breach. The station's losing integrity, she said. We need to move now. They ran through corridors that were beginning to fill with emergency foam as automated systems tried to seal hull breaches. The Wanderer's dream sat in her docking bay like a patient animal, engines already warming in response to Zara's remote activation codes. Plot a course through the deepest part of the asteroid field, Kale said as they reached the ship. If we stay close to the larger rocks, we might be able to avoid detection until we clear the battle zone. And then what? Both fleets will be heading for Platform 7. Then we get there first. Kale strapped himself into the co-pilot's seat as Zara brought the ship online. I'm hoping that whoever set this trap will want to witness their handiwork personally. The docking bay doors opened onto chaos. Energy weapons fire crisscrossed the space between asteroids, and debris from destroyed ships created a deadly obstacle course. Zara eased the Wanderer's dream out of the bay, using the asteroid's bulk to shield them from the worst of the battle. To human destroyers breaking off from the main engagement, Kale reported. Watching the tactical display, they're heading for Platform 7. Probably got orders to secure the research data before the other side can claim it. Zara threaded the ship between the tumbling chunks of rock, the proximity alarms screaming warnings she had to ignore. How many Etherian ships are doing the same thing? At least 3 that I can see. Kel's voice was tight with concentration. Captain, there's something else. I'm reading massive energy signatures from Platform 7 itself. Whatever's on that station, it's not dormant. They cleared the asteroid field just in time to see Platform 7. In the distance, a massive research facility that had supposedly been abandoned for years. But the station was clearly active, its lights blazing against the backdrop of stars. Docking bays opening to receive approaching ships. Someone's been using it all along. Zara breathed. The whole abandoned station story was a lie. Look at the ships already docked there, Kale said, highlighting contacts on the tactical display. Those aren't military vessels. They're civilian corporate transports, private yachts, diplomatic shuttles, a meeting, or a viewing party. Kel's expression was grim. What if this whole battle was arranged as entertainment for the people who profit from human-Etherian conflict? The thought made Zara's stomach turn. Arms dealers, war profiteers, and corporate interests who benefited from keeping to major civilizations at each other's throats. She could imagine such people gathering to watch their investment pay off in blood and fire. Incoming transmission. Kale announced. It's directed specifically at us. Put it through. The voice that filled the cockpit was smooth, cultured, and completely unfamiliar. Captain Thorne, Prince Vorthok, how delightful that you've arrived in time for the festivities. My name is Vega Crosswind, and I've been so looking forward to meeting you both. Never heard of you. Zara replied, though something about the name nagged at her memory. Oh, but I know you quite well. Captain Thorne, whose principled refusal to transport slaves cost her a lucrative career with the Titan Syndicate. Prince Vorthok, whose idealistic opposition to his father's war plans made him a perfect asset for our little drama. You're the one behind this, Kale said, his voice deadly quiet. Behind it, my dear prince. I orchestrated every note of this symphony. Crosswind's laughter held genuine amusement. From the moment you were exiled, you've been dancing to music I composed. Your meeting with Captain Thorne, your decision to seek the Platform 7 data, even your predictable moral outrage. At the thought of interstellar war, all of it has been carefully arranged. Zara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's environmental systems. What do you want? Why? Peace, of course, permanent, profitable peace. Crosswind's tone turned mock serious. You see, war is expensive and unpredictable. But the threat of war, the tension, the arms buildup, the defense contracts that sustainable income. However, lately there have been too many voices on both sides calling for actual diplomatic solutions. People like you, Prince Vorthok, who believe that humans and Etherians can coexist as equals. So you decided to silence those voices by starting a real war, Kale said. Precisely. After today's tragic incident in which a human criminal and an Etherian exile steal classified data and trigger a massacre in neutral space, both governments will have all the justification they need to abandon diplomacy in favor of military solutions. The voices of peace will be drowned out by the drums of war. Platform 7 was growing larger on their screens. Zara could see the approaching military vessels from both fleets, their weapons charged and ready. Soon this entire section of space would become a killing field. There's just one problem with your plan, Zara said. We're not dead yet. Oh, my dear captain, but you will be. You see, Platform 7 isn't just a research station, it's also the galaxy's largest antimatter manufacturing facility. In approximately 30 minutes, a catastrophic accident will destroy the station, taking with it any evidence of tonight's arrangements. The explosion will also eliminate most of the military vessels that have so conveniently gathered to investigate the disturbance. Kel's face had gone pale. You're talking about thousands of lives, the price of progress, I'm afraid. Both sides will blame the other for the disaster, and my associates and I will spend the next several decades profiting from the conflict that follows." Crosswind paused. "I do hope you'll enjoy the show. Platform 7's observation deck offers an excellent view of the proceedings." The transmission ended, leaving them alone with the magnitude of what they'd stumbled into. Thousands of military personnel were flying unknowingly into a trap, while the architects of their destruction watched from the safety of the station's heavily shielded observation areas. "We have to warn them," Zara said. "Warn them of what? That they're about to be murdered by war profiteers?" Kale was already working at his console, trying to access the station's systems. "Even if they believed us, Crosswind's people control the station. They could trigger the explosion the moment anyone tries to evacuate. So what do we do?" Kale met her eyes, and she saw something there that made her breath catch, not just determination, but a depth of feeling that had been building between them since their first meeting in the cantina. "We stop them," he said simply. "Together, that's a suicide." Station's artificial atmosphere. Zara gripped her plasma cutter tighter, every instinct screaming that they were walking into a trap. Beside her, Kale moved with the fluid grace she'd come to associate with him, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his amber eyes constantly scanned their surroundings. Motion sensor should be minimal in the maintenance sections, he whispered as they made their way through a corridor lined with massive conduits and power relays. "But watch for—" A plasma bolt seared the air inches from Zara's head, and she dove behind a junction box as armed figures emerged from concealment points. She hadn't even noticed. Corporate security, heavily armed and clearly expecting them. "So much for minimal sensors," she muttered, returning fire with her plasma cutter. The tool wasn't designed as a weapon, but it could cut through most personal armor at close range. Kale had taken cover behind a power coupling, and she watched him produce a weapon she hadn't known he was carrying, something sleek and alien that fired coherent energy bursts with surgical precision. Two of their attackers dropped before the others realized they were facing someone with military training. "There's another access route," Kale called over the sound of weapons fire. "Through the environmental systems. Can you reach that ventilation grate?" Zara looked where he was pointing and saw a maintenance opening about 15 feet away. It might as well have been on another planet given the crossfire between them and their destination. "Cover me," she said, and broke from cover in a sprint that felt like the longest run of her life. Plasma bolts scorched the walls around her as she reached the grate, her plasma cutter making quick work of the security bolts. She was halfway through the opening when strong hands grabbed her ankles. One of the security guards had flanked their position, and he was trying to drag her back into the corridor. Zara twisted, bringing her cutter around in an arc that made the man release her with a scream. "Kale," she called, but when she looked back, her blood went cold. 3 more guards had appeared from another access corridor, and they had Kale surrounded. His weapon lay on the deck, where it had been knocked from his hands, and even his Etherean reflexes couldn't dodge 3 plasma rifles at close range. "Captain Thorne," one of the guards called out, his voice echoing in the confined space. "Come out now, or your alien boyfriend becomes spare parts." Zara's mind raced. The maintenance shaft she was in led directly to the station's central power core, exactly where they needed to go to stop the antimatter explosion. But reaching it meant abandoning Kale to almost certain death. She looked at him through the grate and saw him mouth a single word: "Go." "Like hell," she whispered back, and dropped from the shaft with her plasma cutter blazing. The next few minutes were chaos energy bolts lighting up the corridor like a lethal light show, the smell of ozone and burned metal filling the air. Zara found herself fighting beside Kale with an instinctive coordination that surprised her, as if they'd been partners for years instead of days. When the last guard fell, they stood in the smoking corridor, both breathing hard. "That was incredibly stupid," Kale said, checking his weapon for damage. "Yeah, well, you bring out my stupid side." Zara wiped sweat from her forehead, leaving a streak of grime. "Besides, I'm not leaving you behind. We're in this together." Something flickered in his amber eyes: surprise, gratitude, and something deeper that made her heart skip. "Together," he agreed, and the way he said it made the words sound like a promise. They made their way deeper into the station's infrastructure, following maintenance corridors that grew progressively more complex. The antimatter containment facility was at the station's core, surrounded by enough shielding to contain a small star. As they moved closer, Zara could feel the subtle vibration in the deck plates that spoke of enormous energies, barely held in check. There, Kale pointed to a massive blast door marked with warnings in multiple languages. The containment control room should be just beyond that door. Should be. The schematics I memorized were 3 years old. Stations like this are constantly being modified. Kale was working on the door's access panel, his fingers moving with the kind of precision that came from years of training. But the basic layout should be: the door slid open to reveal not a control room, but an observation deck, and standing at the center of it, perfectly at ease despite the battle raging outside, was a woman who matched the voice they'd heard earlier. Vega Crosswind was strikingly beautiful in the way that extensive genetic modification could achieve to perfect to be entirely natural. Her hair was silver white, her eyes an unsettling shade of violet that reminded Zara uncomfortably of Kel's natural coloring. She wore a tailored suit that probably cost more than most people earned in a year, and she was smiling. Captain Thorne, Prince Vorthuk, so punctual. Crosswind gestured to the massive viewport behind her, where the space battle continued to rage. You're just in time for the finale. Through the transparent aluminum, Zara could see both fleets locked in deadly combat. Ships burned and died in the void while their crews fought for causes that had been manufactured by the woman standing before them. How many people are you going to kill for profit? Kale asked, his voice deadly quiet. Oh, it's not just about profit, Your Highness. Though the defense contracts alone will be worth several trillion credits over the next decade. Crosswind moved to a control console, her fingers dancing over displays that showed the station's antimatter containment systems. It's about stability, order, the natural progression of civilized society. Mass murder isn't civilized, Zara snarled, isn't it? Your human history is built on precisely that principle. Millions die so that the survivors can live in the world. The victors create. Crosswind's smile never wavered. I'm simply applying those lessons on a galactic scale. Kale took a step forward, but Crosswind touched something on her console, and energy barriers sprang up around them, prison cells made of coherent light. Now, I know Etherian physiology quite well, Prince. Those barriers will deliver a lethal shock if you try to force your way through them. Crosswind returned her attention to the console. You have front row seats for history in the making. In approximately 8 minutes, a cascade failure in the antimatter containment system will destroy this station, and most of the ships currently engaged in battle. Both sides will blame the other, diplomacy will be abandoned, and the galaxy will settle into a profitable state of perpetual warfare. What makes you think either side won't investigate what really happened here? Zara demanded. Because the evidence will be quite clear. A human smuggler and an exiled Etherian prince working together to steal military secrets. Their ship was detected near the station moments before the explosion. Obviously, their theft operation went wrong and triggered the disaster. Crosswind's violet eyes gleamed with satisfaction. The fact that you're both here, dead in the wreckage, will simply confirm the narrative. Kale was studying the energy barrier with the kind of intensity Zara had learned to recognize. There's something you haven't considered, he said slowly. And what's that? The cascade failure you're planning. It won't just destroy the station. At this power level, the antimatter explosion will tear a hole in subspace itself. The gravitational distortion will pull in everything within a light-year radius. Crosswind's smile faltered slightly. That's impossible. The containment systems are designed to. The containment systems are designed for controlled releases, not deliberate overloads. Kel's voice carried the authority of someone who had designed similar systems. You're not just going to kill the people in this battle, you're going to create a spatial anomaly that will make this entire sector uninhabitable. Zara saw uncertainty flicker across Crosswind's perfect features. You're lying. Am I? How much? Do you actually know about antimatter physics? Kale moved closer to the barrier, his amber eyes fixed on Crosswind's face. Or did you just trust your technical advisors to handle the details, while you focused on the profits? The calculations were verified by whom? Corporate scientists whose funding depends on telling you what you want to hear. Kel's voice carried conviction that was impossible to fake. Vega, if you trigger that cascade, you won't just be starting a war, you'll be committing species suicide. The observation deck fell silent except for the distant rumble of the station's systems. Through the viewport, Zara could see more ships arriving, reinforcements for both fleets that would only increase the death toll when the explosion came. Even if you're right, Crosswind said finally, it's too late to stop it. The cascade is already beginning. The containment fields are destabilizing on a preset schedule. Then help us stop it, Zara said. Drop these barriers and let us try to stabilize the system. Why would you do that? You're both going to die anyway. Zara looked at Kale, seeing her own thoughts reflected in his eyes. They might die trying to stop the explosion, but they would definitely die if they did nothing. And if Kale was right about this spatial anomaly, their deaths would be the least of the galaxy's problems, because it's the right thing to do, she said simply. Crosswind stared at them for a long moment, her violet eyes unreadable. Then, to Zara's surprise, she laughed a sound with no humor in it whatsoever. How wonderfully naive. You actually believe that doing the right thing matters. In the fact. Zara woke to the gentle hum of medical equipment, and the feeling of warm fingers intertwined with hers. The sterile white ceiling above her was definitely human standard, which meant they were no longer aboard Platform 7. She turned her head, carefully expecting pain from her shoulder wound, but finding only a dull ache. The medical bay on the Wanderer's Dream, Kale explained, noticing her confusion. His amber eyes were rimmed with exhaustion, and his clothes were rumpled as if he'd been sitting beside her bed. For hours, we've been docked at Meridian Station. For 3 days, Zara tried to sit up, but Kel's gentle pressure on her uninjured shoulder kept her lying down. The plasma burn was more severe than it initially appeared. You've been in and out of consciousness while the regeneration treatments worked. His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. For a while, I wasn't sure. The raw emotion in his voice made her chest tighten. I'm okay, she said softly. We're okay. What happened after I passed out? Crosswind was taken into custody by Admiral Torres of the Confederation Fleet. Turns out she'd been under investigation for war profiteering for months, but they needed evidence of active sedition. Kel's expression darkened. The evidence we provided was more than sufficient, and the fleets, both sides stood down once the truth came out. There's going to be a joint investigation, and probably the most comprehensive peace talks in galactic history. Kale smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. We did it, Zara. We actually prevented a war. Something in his tone made her study his face more carefully. You don't sound happy about it. I am happy. It's just. Kale released her hand and moved to the small viewport, staring out at the space station beyond. While you were recovering, I received a message from my father. The Emperor is willing to pardon my exile and restore me to the succession. Full amnesty. Complete reinstatement, as if the past year never happened. Zara felt ice form in her stomach. What did you tell him? That I needed time to consider his offer. Kale turned back to her, and she saw conflict warring in his amber eyes. Zara, if I return to Etherian space, I could help shape the peace negotiations from within the government. I could ensure that any treaties are fair to both species. That's a good thing, she said carefully, though every instinct was screaming that this conversation was leading somewhere she didn't want to go. It is, but there's a condition. Kel's voice grew quiet. My father's amnesty doesn't extend to my associations with non-Etherians. If I return, I would have to sever all ties with humans, permanently. The words hit her like a physical blow. All ties, including you. Kale moved back to her bedside, his expression anguished. Zara, I don't know what to do. Part of me says I have a duty to my people, that I could do more good working within the system than as an exile. But the thought of losing you, Zara, stared at the ceiling, trying to process what he was telling her. After everything they'd been through, after the connection they'd built, he was considering walking away, because his father had offered him his old life back. What do you want to do? She asked finally. I want to stay with you, Kale said immediately. I want to build something new, something that doesn't require choosing between love and duty. But I also know that billions of lives could be affected by these peace negotiations. If I could help ensure they succeed, then you should go." The words came out more calmly than Zara felt. She could see the surprise on Kel's face. Probably expected her to fight for him, to demand that he choose her over his responsibilities. "Zara, you should go," she repeated, forcing herself to meet his eyes. "You're right about the peace negotiations. This might be the only chance our species have to avoid destroying each other. If you can help make that happen, then that's more important than what we have." Kale stared at her for a long moment. "What we have," he said slowly, "is the most important thing in my life. These past few days, watching you fight for strangers, risking your life for principles that don't benefit you at all, Zara, you've shown me what it means to love someone completely. But I also know that if I choose my own happiness over the chance to save lives, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering if I could have prevented future wars, future suffering." Kel's hands clenched into fists. "And I know that you would never be able to respect someone who made that choice." The horrible thing was that he was right, even as her heart was breaking. Zara knew she couldn't ask him to abandon his duty for her sake. It would change him into someone she couldn't love, someone who put personal desires above the greater good. "So what now?" she asked. "Now I go back to Etherean space, and you return to whatever life you were living before we met." Kel's voice was carefully neutral, but she could see the pain he was trying to hide. "The Confederation has agreed to drop all charges against you in recognition of your service. You're free to go anywhere you want, anywhere except with you, anywhere except with me." They sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of impossible choices settling between them. Finally, Zara forced herself to speak. "When do you leave?" "There's a diplomatic transport departing for Etherean space in 6 hours." Kel's voice was barely above a whisper. "The negotiations begin in 2 weeks, and I need time to prepare. Then you should go get ready." Zara turned her face away from him, not trusting herself to maintain composure if she kept looking at his amber eyes. "Thank you for saving my life, and for showing me what it's like to fight for something that matters." She heard him stand, heard his footsteps moving toward the door, but instead of leaving, he stopped. "Zara," he said quietly, "if I could find a way to make this work, if there was some way to fulfill my duty and stay with you, would you want that?" "Yes," she whispered. "But we both know there isn't." "Maybe not yet," Kale said, "but perhaps someday when the galaxy is a little bit safer, when the peace is more secure, perhaps then there might be room for the kind of love that crosses species lines." "Perhaps," Zara agreed, though she didn't believe it. After he left, she lay in the medical bay staring at the ceiling and trying not to think about amber eyes and elegant hands and the way he'd said her name like it was something precious. Eventually, she forced herself to get up and begin preparing for whatever came next. 3 months later, Zara stood in the observation lounge of New Geneva Station, watching the news feeds that were covering the signing of the Meridian Accords. The peace treaty between humanity and the Etherean Republic was being hailed as the most comprehensive interspecies agreement in galactic history, establishing frameworks for trade, cultural exchange, and mutual defense. The camera focused on the signing ceremony, and her breath caught as she saw Kale among the Etherean delegation. He looked older, more formal in his ceremonial robes, but she could still see the man who had fought beside her in the depths of Platform 7. "Historic day," someone said beside her, and Zara turned to see a young woman with mixed heritage features, definitely human, but with the golden skin tone and amber eyes that suggested Etherean ancestry. "Phoenix Chen Malik," the woman introduced herself, extending a hand. "I'm a journalist covering the peace talks. You're Captain Thorne, aren't you? The smuggler who helped prevent the war?" "Former smuggler," Zara corrected, accepting the handshake. "These days I run cargo for the relief efforts in the Outer Rim territories, still helping people." Phoenix observed, "Some things don't change." She paused, studying Zara's expression. "You know Prince Vorthik personally, don't you?" "We worked together briefly," Zara said carefully. "He's been one of the strongest voices for interspecies cooperation during the negotiations." Phoenix continued, "There are rumors that he's planning something beyond just the treaty. Some kind of long-term cultural exchange program that would allow humans and Etherians to work together on civilian projects. Despite herself, Zara felt a spark of hope. What kind of projects? Humanitarian relief, scientific research, exploration of the unknown sectors. Phoenix smiled. The kind of work that requires people who are willing to put principles above politics. People like you and Prince Vorthok. On the screen, the signing ceremony was concluding. As the delegates stood to shake hands, Kale looked directly at the camera, and for a moment Zara could have sworn he was looking right at her. Double quotes Miss Chen Malik. She said slowly, "Tell me more about this cultural exchange program." 6 months after that, Zara found herself aboard a mixed-crew vessel heading for the Kepler Nebula, where reports of refugee ships from the war-torn Cygnus sector had prompted a joint human-Etherian relief mission. She was serving as the ship's pilot, working alongside scientists, doctors, and engineers from both species. And standing on the bridge beside her, coordinating the mission with quiet authority, was Kale. Approaching the first refugee ship, he reported, his amber eyes reflecting the glow of the tactical displays. "Looks like a civilian transport, heavily damaged." "I see it," Zara replied, her hands steady on the controls as she maneuvered their ship into position. "Docking bay is clear for emergency landing." They worked together with the easy coordination they'd developed over the past few months. Professional and efficient, but underneath the professional facade, Zara was intensely aware of every movement he made. Every time their hands brushed as they reached for the same control. It had taken time to Ray. 25 years after the signing of the Meridian Accords, Zara Thornvorthik stood on the observation deck of Harmony Station, watching her daughter pilot a mixed-crew diplomatic vessel through the complex orbital traffic of what had once been neutral space. The station itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering, human pragmatism blended with Etherian elegance, creating something beautiful and functional that neither species could have built alone. "She handles the ship just like you did at that age," Kale observed, moving to stand beside his wife. His amber eyes held the same warmth they always had, though silver now threaded through his dark hair, all confidence and controlled chaos. "Speak for yourself," Zara replied with a smile, watching their daughter Nova execute a docking maneuver that would have made veteran pilots nervous. "She gets the reckless streak from both sides of the family, through the transparent aluminum." They could see other ships moving through the system, not just human and Etherian vessels, but craft from dozens of species that had joined the growing coalition of worlds. The Cygnan Collective, the Silicon Hegemony, even the mysterious Void Walkers had all signed cooperation agreements. Modeled on the original Meridian Accords, the council meeting starts in an hour. Kale noted, checking the chronometer on his wrist. "Are you ready to face another round of suggestions about our retirement?" Zara laughed. "Ambassador Rivers has been trying to get us to step down from active duty for 5 years now. She seems to think people our age should be content with ceremonial positions and writing memoirs. Perhaps she has a point. We've been running relief missions and diplomatic interventions for 2.5 decades. Some people might say we've earned the right to rest. Some people," Zara said, leaning against her husband's shoulder, "clearly don't understand what it means to have found their calling." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of their son, Marcus, whose mixed heritage showed in his golden brown skin and eyes that shifted between human brown and Etherian amber depending on the light. At 23, he had inherited his mother's quick wit and his father's diplomatic instincts, along with a stubborn streak that exceeded both parents combined. "The Proxima delegation is asking for you specifically," he reported, slightly out of breath from running through the station corridors. "There's been another outbreak of species tensions in the mining colonies, and they want the legendary mediators to handle it personally." Kale sighed. "Legendary mediators? I still can't get used to that title. Better than the war heroes who fell in love," Zara pointed out. "Though I suppose both versions miss the point." "Which is?" Marcus asked, genuinely curious. "That we're not special because we're human and Etherian," Kale explained. "We're effective because we learned that the differences between species matter less than the values they share." And because Mom shoots first and asks questions later when diplomacy fails. Nova's voice added from behind them. She had just arrived from her docking bay, her flight suit still bearing the scorch marks of a recent encounter with space pirates. At 25, she was already making a name for herself as one of the galaxy's most skilled pilots, following in her mother's footsteps while blazing her own trail. "I do not shoot first," Zara protested. "I shoot immediately after the other side demonstrates that reasonable conversation is no longer an option," which, in Mom's experience, happens about 60% of the time, Marcus observed with fond exasperation. 70%, Nova corrected. "I've been keeping track." Cale watched his family banter with the kind of contentment that still surprised him sometimes. 25 years ago, the idea of human Etherian children had been not just impossible, but unthinkable. Now Marcus and Nova moved through the galaxy as living proof that cooperation could transcend the boundaries of species, culture, and old prejudices. "The council meeting," he reminded them gently, "right?" Zara straightened, her expression becoming more serious. "Nova, how did the reconnaissance mission go?" "The Andromeda Gateway is definitely being used by someone," Nova reported, "but not by any of the known species. The energy signatures are completely unfamiliar, and the ships we detected don't match any design in our databases." The discovery of the ancient gateway network had been one of the most significant developments of the past decade. Scattered throughout the galaxy were massive structures of unknown origin that could create instantaneous travel across vast distances. Most were inactive, but the few that had been reactivated had revolutionized interstellar travel and communication. "Unknown doesn't necessarily mean hostile," Marcus pointed out. "We've learned that lesson before." "True," Cale agreed, "but it does mean we need to approach with caution. The galaxy has become more peaceful, but that peace depends on all parties knowing who they're dealing with." They made their way through Harmony Station's corridors, past the mixed crowds of humans, Etherians, and other species who now worked together as naturally as breathing. The station served as the administrative center for the Galactic Cooperation Initiative, the organization that had grown out of the original peace treaties to become something approaching an interstellar government. The council chamber was a vast amphitheater designed to accommodate representatives from dozens of different species, each with their own environmental and social requirements. Ambassador Rivers, now in her 70s but still sharp as a plasma cutter, stood at the central podium addressing the assembled delegates. "Which brings us to the Andromeda Gateway situation," she was saying as Zara and Cale took their seats. "Captain Thorn Vorthik has just returned from reconnaissance, and her report raises some interesting questions." Nova stood to address the council, her voice carrying the confidence that came from a lifetime of being treated as an equal. Regardless of her mixed heritage, the ships we observed were definitely artificial, not natural phenomena. But their technology appears to be centuries ahead of anything in our current databases. They're using some form of spacetime manipulation that makes our fastest vessels look like sailing ships. A ripple of concern went through the chamber. In the decades since the Meridian Accords, the galaxy had grown accustomed to being the most advanced civilization in known space. The idea that something vastly superior might exist was both thrilling and terrifying. "Have you attempted communication?" asked Sage Kelleth, the elderly Etherian who served as the council's chief xenobiologist. "We tried standard first contact protocols," Nova replied. "No response to any of our signals. Either they didn't recognize our attempts at communication, or they chose to ignore them." "Or," said a new voice from the chamber's entrance, "they're waiting to see if we're worthy of their attention." Everyone turned to see an elderly human woman entering the chamber, supported by a walking stick, but moving with determined purpose. Zara felt her breath catch as she recognized Dr. Elizabeth Summers, the xenoarchaeologist who had first discovered the Gateway Network. "Dr. Summers," Ambassador Rivers said with surprise, "we weren't expecting you back from the Outer Rim for another month." "The artifacts at the Epsilon site revealed some interesting information," Summers replied, making her way to a guest speaker's position, including references to what the Gateway builders called the Watchers, a species that apparently monitors younger civilizations to determine their potential for growth. The implications sent a chill through the chamber. The idea that humanity and its allies had been under observation, possibly for centuries, was unsettling at best. What kind of potential are they looking for? Cale asked, standing to address Summers directly, based on the fragmentary records we've decoded. They seem to be interested in species that can transcend their evolutionary limitations. Through cooperation rather than conquest. Summers smiled at him with genuine warmth. In other words, species that learn to work together instead of destroying each other. Like the Galactic Cooperation Initiative, Marcus said slowly. We've proven that dozens of different species can work together peacefully. More than that, Summers continued. The records suggest that the Watchers are particularly interested in hybrid offspring individuals who represent successful genetic and cultural integration between different species. Every eye in the chamber turned to Marcus and Nova, who suddenly found themselves at the center of galactic attention. Zara felt a surge of protective instinct, but forced herself to remain calm. You're saying our children might be the reason these Watchers are making contact, she asked. I'm saying your children and others like them represent something that has never existed before. In recorded galactic history, Summers replied. Successful integration between species that evolved on different worlds, under different conditions, with different biology. That's unprecedented. The chamber fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications. The Galactic Cooperation Initiative had always been about more than politics or economics. It had been about proving that intelligence could overcome the primitive instincts of fear and aggression, but none of them had imagined that their experiment in peaceful coexistence might be part of some larger test. What do we do now? Ambassador Rivers asked finally. We continue being ourselves, Cale said, his voice carrying the authority that came from decades of diplomatic experience. If the Watch